Hi guys, we're gonna enjoy a chapter 3 of I Survived the Shark Attack of 1916. Okay, we left off on chapter 2, so we'll start on chapter 3. Um, I'm sitting outside today and I had to bring a blanket because it's super chilly. So let's get started. Oops, my page got turned. The year was 1852, the captain began. I wasn't much older than you lads. It was one of my first whaling voyages. 2 years at sea, and finally I was heading home across the Pacific. His voice was low and whispery, like it was coming from someplace very far away. Suddenly the sky turned black, the wind started to howl, and the rain poured down. I'll never forget those waves. I thought our ship was going to be tossed to the moon. And the wind, it ripped our ship apart like it was made of paper. We all went into the water. I grabbed a barrel and somehow I made it through the night. By the time the sun came up, the storm had passed. I was all alone, just a tiny speck in the middle of the ocean. The other men died? Dewey asked. The captain didn't seem to hear. And then I saw the fin. The shark, whispered Monty, edging a little closer to Sid. Shh, Sid said. It circled for a long time. The captain said, around and around real slow, like he was toying with me. Little by little, it came closer and closer until I could see its eyes. Black as coal, he whispered, killer eyes. The captain was looking out the window now like he expected to see the shark with its own jaws pressing against the glass. Killer eyes, he repeated quietly. It was a minute before he started talking again. The guys waited, their tongues practically hanging out. The beast went underwater for a second. I thought maybe it decided I wasn't worth the trouble, but then something bumped my leg, scraped me bloody. The skin of the shark was rough. You can use you can use it as sandpaper. The captain rubbed his leg like it still hurt. It came in for the kill with its jaws wide, the captain said, big enough to swallow me whole, and its teeth like daggers, 1,000 daggers all lined up in rows. The captain's hands were shaking now. I had an old harpoon tip in my pocket. I grabbed it and I stabbed the shark. He pounded the counter so hard that his coffee mug crashed to the floor. The captain didn't notice. Right in the killer's eye, he said, you killed it? Dewey said. The captain shook his head. Oh, no, he said, but it swam off. Disappeared. It wasn't my time. Then he stood up and put his tattered captain's hat on. I must get home, he said. My sweet Deborah will be waiting for me. Deborah was his wife. She'd been dead for at least 20 years. Chet and the guys watched him leave. Uncle Jerry had come out of the kitchen when he heard the crash of the captain's cup. Poor old guy, he said, as he swept up the mess. His mind is kind of like Swiss cheese. You mean that story isn't true, Monty asked. Uncle Jerry shrugged. I think the captain spins a mighty fine tale. Stabbed it with a harpoon tip, Dewey laughed. Killer eyes, Monty barked. Next, the captain will be telling us he got gobbled up by a whale, Sid said. Still, Chet thought about the captain all day. He didn't really believe the story either. Uncle Jerry was right. Whoever heard of a shark attacking a person? No, it wasn't the shark that scared him. It was the idea of being alone in the middle of the ocean. Strange, but Chet could imagine that feeling. He'd been traveling around the country with Mama and Papa most of his life. Papa was always chasing some new business idea. Selling motorcycles in Oregon, building bicycles in St. Louis, taking family portraits in Philadelphia. Mama would get them settled into an apartment or a rundown little house. Chet would make it to a make Chet would try to make a couple of friends. And just when they were starting to get comfortable, the business would go bad, or Papa would get another idea and we're hitting the road. Papa would announce, and Mama would have to start packing again. Chet was supposed to go along to California, where Papa decided he'd finally struck it rich. But then Mama decided that Chet would stay with Uncle Jerry instead. It's a nice town, Mama said, and Uncle Jerry will take good care of you. Chet remembered all the fun he used to have with Uncle Jerry. Then, when he was little, how Uncle Jerry had taught him how to throw a baseball, but they hadn't seen each other in years. Would his uncle even recognize him? after all this time. He shouldn't have worried. Uncle Jerry was standing on the train platform when Chet got off, a huge grin on his face. It's about time, he said to Chet, wrapping it up in a hug that went around until the train pulled out. From the first day, Uncle Jerry made him feel right at home, but Chet missed Mama and Papa, and it didn't matter how much he loved being with Uncle Jerry or how many people shouted, "Hiya, Chet," when they came into the diner. Soon enough, he'd have to join Mama and Papa in California. Would he ever really belong anywhere, or would he always be on his own? Tiny speck in the middle of the ocean. Chapter 4. The next week was hot. Horses were fainting up and down Main Street. By Thursday, the temperature inside the diner was 102 degrees. Chet didn't mind the heat. Something amazing had happened that day. The guys invited Chet to go swimming with them at the creek. All week, they'd been coming into the diner earlier and earlier and then sticking around even after they wolfed down their donuts. You ever seen the Pacific Ocean? Sid asked one day. Sure, Chet said. What's it look like, Monty asked. Chet took a minute to picture it. He didn't want to disappoint the guys. A little bluer than the Atlantic. Waves a little bigger, maybe, but otherwise just lots of water and waves. They all seemed satisfied. How about the Mississippi River? Dewey asked the next day. You seen that too? Chet told them it was wide and muddy. I was on a steamboat that got stuck in the mud, Chet said. He had to stay there for a whole day and night. That impressed them all. You're the luckiest kid I know, Sid pronounced. Me? Chet said. Sure, Lonnie said. To see all those places? I don't know. Chet said, I hate moving around so much. Hearing those words startled Chet. He felt that way, but he'd never say it out loud. Not even Uncle Jerry. He hoped the guys didn't think he was belly aching. Hey, why don't you come down to the creek? Sid said. We're always looking for you there, Monty said. Chet tried to hide his surprise. It's not the Pacific Ocean, Dewey said, but it's pretty nice. The guys all laughed. Why don't you come today? Sid said. Chet said, I hear it's better than the Pacific. Why don't you come today? Sid said. And of course, Chet said he would meet them there. Uncle Jerry drew Chet a little map so he wouldn't get lost, a dotted line to the end of Main Street, and then behind the tile factory, down a steep hill and across the path. Chet made it to the bottom of the hill, and for a second he thought he was lost. He couldn't see the creek, just tall golden grass, but then he could hear shouts and splashing. He walked through the grass and into the clearing. The guy's dusty trousers and shirts were laid across some low branches. 3 pairs of scuffed boots were tumbled across the dirt, and just beyond there was the creek. The guys were right. It wasn't much, but maybe 20 feet across. He couldn't tell if it was deep enough to dive, but it was nice and shady, and at that moment there was no place on earth Chet would rather be. Hurry up, Dewey shouted. The water's perfect. Chet threw his clothes off and climbed up onto the broken down dock. Jump, Sid said. With a running leap, Chet launched himself in the air. Whoosh! The cool water rose up around him. All of his worries washed away. The guys gathered around him. Dewey threw a pink rubber ball high into the air. Chet, catch, he said. Chet squinted up into the sun and miraculously caught the ball. Here, Sid yelled, jumping up and waving his hands. Chet threw the ball straight enough like Uncle Jerry had taught him. Sid made a clean catch. They played ball, then they took turns jumping off the dock and chasing each other back and forth across the creek. When they got tired of swimming, they sat on the bank under the elm tree. Dewey's mother had packed him up 3 big molasses cookies, and the guys fought over them. The creek's nice, Chet said with a mouthful of cookie. No Elm Hills, Monty said. You think you'll be staying for a while, said Dewey. Chet swallowed hard. Just the day before, he'd got a letter from Mama. We have a nice apartment with a room just for you, she wrote. I think Papa is going to have some good luck with this time. I hope, he said. The guys all nodded. Minnie Marston's sweet on you, Dewey said. Really? Chet squeaked. Sure, Monty said, sounding a little jealous. She told my sister. They sat there a while talking about Minnie and Uncle Jerry's no-hitter in high school finals of 1908. Then Sid stood up and dove back into the water. They followed him. Sid went swimming down the creek, and Chet played ball with Dewey and Monty. He and Monty tossed the ball back and forth a few times. Dewey, Chet called, ready to throw the ball, but Dewey didn't look at him. He was looking at something downstream. He had a strange look on his face. And then Chet saw it too, a gray triangle sticking up from the water, heading right toward Dewey. What was that? It looked like a fin of a giant fish. Was it? He shook his head. His eyes were playing tricks on him. A shark in the creek was impossible. He even tried to laugh. His mind must be messed up because of the captain's story. But the fin was getting closer to Dewey. Faster and faster, Dewey, Chet shouted, but it was too late. There was a huge splash, and then Dewey disappeared. What do you think is going to happen next? I can't wait to hear your thoughts about this in the comments below. See you tomorrow.